To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. Deuteronomy 32:35 may well have been propitious words on March 15th, when Governor Ralph Northam, by executive order, closed the doors of all non-essential gatherings of 100 people or more, including statistically that which would represent half of the churches in the Commonwealth of Virginia. A decree extended to those smaller places of worship by the order issued on March 17th, coincident with the feast of St. Patrick, or St. Patrick's Day. The decree was issued at a time when Governor Northam knew, or should have known, that only 1/5 of all Christian churches possessed an organic capability to conduct virtual worship, enabling their members to engage in devotional practices arising from their sincerely held faith beliefs. And at the end of a sweeping statewide lockdown, approximately 1/5 of churches closed before the observance of Easter have perished and will not return again, while once thriving congregations even have great trouble coming close to filling capacity in worship services limited to only 200 participants or less. To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. Deuteronomy 32:35 was also the biblical text from which Reverend John Edwards relied on July 8, 1741, to preach his classic sermon titled Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, focusing upon the words, their foot shall slide in due time, which he posited to imply the following things relating to punishment and destruction to which these wicked Israelites were exposed, which for the next few moments we will make reference to in contemporary times. First, that they were always exposed to destruction, as one that stands or walks in slippery places is always exposed to fall. Despite the setting of a global pandemic, the predominant narrative that stirs most to action subordinates the saving of lives to winning an election, an acquisition of political power, worldly power. It is the topic of most interest in the news, the topic of commercials, hashtag phrases, and social media posts. And even when numbers of infected persons or fatalities are even mentioned, it is always referenced to a day of judgment and atonement in November, in an election booth, for which early voting began on September 18th in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And on the ballot in Virginia's 8th Congressional District, where the incumbent Donald Byer is seeking his 4th term and what he calls the most important election of his lifetime, one name is not on the ballot, but rather continues to battle through courts that have recognized a pandemic exception to absentee voters, as well as to candidates seeking qualification to appear on the ballot. But the Attorney General, Mark Herring, arguing for the governor and the State Board of Elections, has maintained that for unknown reasons, one particular candidate is somehow different from the rest. And that litigation has raised serious concerns beyond an election in a congressional district that has decided the outcome of statewide elections for the past 2 decades, but also has challenged the very authority upon which the governor relied to declare a statewide emergency that adversely closed most businesses and effectively closed all churches throughout the state. And it is an election where the stakes are very high, because just flipping the 13 electoral college votes in Virginia represents no longer a tight race for the presidency, but rather a short win for the president. Reverend Edwards posited, second, regarding the early Israelites, that they were always exposed to sudden, unexpected destruction, And if not reminded by daily reports of rising infections, Governor Northam on May 28th issued a facial coverings mandate that would require businesses to compel persons to cover their faces with what he even then described as presenting an important symbol to remind everyone of the dangers of a lethal pandemic, that everyone might be compelled to comply with his law, an issue which only one political campaign took issue because of its patent unconstitutionality, imposing a burden upon the free exercise of religion, as well as denying equal protection under the law, treating one group in disparate treatment vis-a-vis other similarly situated persons, and imposing a regulation and establishment of a state religion, albeit a secular one, promoting science, and for its continuing impact upon churches that have now been permitted to reopen, but only upon condition that, unlike any other business, congregants are required to wear their facial coverings at all times in reminder of the pandemic. Reverend Edwards posited third, regarding the early Israelites, that they are liable to fall of themselves without being thrown down by the hand of another, as he that stands or walks on slippery ground needs nothing but his own weight to throw him down. And Governor Northam knew, or should have known at the time of the issue of his orders, that only 1/5 of the churches in Virginia even possessed an online capability, which he ordered them to use in his guidance letter issued to the communities of faith on April 7, 2020. And a challenge about which he was so aware that he refused to enter an appearance in litigation commenced in the City of Alexandria, in which the only campaign for Congress that raised during the litigation to compel the State Board of Elections to recognize the existence of a pandemic-related burden imposed by regulations, and seeking an extension within which for candidates to attempt to qualify for the ballot, all of which just 1 week later was denied even the issue of an injunction on the rationale that such a case would not possibly prevail on the merits. And by June, fulfilling the prophetic announcement by that court, the matter was dismissed on the rationale that no justiciable controversy even existed, neither with regard to that political campaign nor the violations of religious liberty guaranteed by the Constitution. And Reverend Edwards posited finally, regarding the early Israelites, that the reason why they are not fallen already and do not fall now is only that God's appointed time has not come. Correspondingly, in contemporary times, it has been days since Governor Northam has published news regarding his sudden infection, about which he had repeatedly issued guidance, under the assurance of his medical training, would keep all Virginians safe. After months of robust litigation, during which Northam had evaded both the Department of the Sheriff for the City of Alexandria and the United States Marshal, in attempts to bring him under the jurisdiction of the court to be held accountable for closing churches, neglecting the elderly in nursing homes, imposing an undue burden upon businesses, and all without ever substantiating the existence of a communicable disease. Governor Northam, only moments after announcement that an affidavit had been filed in the Fourth Circuit to establish not only that COVID-19 was, in fact, not a communicable disease, but rather a biological agent being deployed, but also that at all relevant times, Governor Northam was fully aware of the fact. He announced seeking statewide pity that both he and his wife had been infected with a lethal pathogen, which by simple matter of statistics placed him at high risk as a person in his 60s. And he has now gone into hiding, like Adam and Eve, being discovered naked, with his attorneys to calculate how to continue avoiding the wrath of an angry God for his indiscretions and deceit. Reverend Edwards warned that there is nothing that keeps wicked men at any one moment out of hell but the mere pleasure of God, which proposition he believed was demonstrated by the following considerations. There is no want of power in God to cast wicked men into hell at any moment. They deserve to be cast into hell, so that divine justice never stands in the way it makes no objection against God using his power at any moment to destroy them. They are already under a sentence of condemnation to hell. They are now the objects of that very same anger and wrath of God that is expressed in the torments of hell. And the reason why they do not go down to hell at each moment is not because God, in whose power they are, is not at present very angry with them, as he is with many miserable creatures now tormented in hell, who there feel and bear the fierceness of his wrath. The devil stands ready to fall upon them and seize them as his own, at what moment God shall permit him. There are in the souls of wicked men those hellish principles reigning that would presently kindle and flame out into hell fire if it were not for God's restraint. It is no security to wicked men for one moment that there are no visible means of death at hand. Natural men's prudence and care to preserve their own lives, or the care of others to preserve them, do not secure them a moment. All wicked men's pains and contrivances which they use to escape hell, while they continue to reject Christ and so remain wicked men, do not secure them from hell one moment. And God has laid himself under no obligation by any promise to keep any natural man out of hell one moment. Reverend Edwards exhorted his congregation to consider the following observations. First, whose wrath it is. It is the wrath of the infinite God. If it were only the wrath of man, though it were of the most potent prince, it would be comparatively little to be regarded. Second, it is the fierceness of his wrath that you are exposed to. And finally, the misery you are exposed to is that which God will inflict to the end that he might show what the wrath of Jehovah is. Therefore, let everyone that is out of Christ now awake and flee from the wrath to come. The wrath of Almighty God is now undoubtedly hanging over every unregenerate sinner. Let everyone flee out of Sodom. Escape for your lives. Look not behind you. Escape to the mountain, lest you, too, be consumed. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress. With liberty, honor, and excellence, by God, we shall make America great again. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.